Hello everyone and welcome to a very special edition of Barry Morgan Horror Geek. This is a special edition for two reasons. The first, it's my birthday and I'm very happy to say that I'm 27 years old. I'm back in my home state of Indiana and I'm here at my dad's house. Now Dad's around here somewhere. Let's see if we can find him. And I tracked down Dad. Hey Dad, how's it going?
It's going real well, Barry. I'm glad you're here.
So for everyone who is curious, this is the guy who started my love affair with horror movies. So Dad, where are we going today?
Well, we're going to the house on the lake. The year was 1987 when we went to that house.
Alright everyone, I told you earlier that today was special for two reasons. One is, again, it's my 27th birthday. And two, we're going to 1313 Blood Lane. Alright everyone, we're getting close. Now if you haven't figured this out, I didn't actually grow up at 1313 Blood Lane. It's more of a metaphor for part of my childhood, which was spent at this little house that we are about ready to get to. Now, I grew up in a little town called Flora, Indiana, and every weekend my dad would pick me up and we'd travel about 50 to 60 miles up to a little tiny house that he had on a lake called Lake Palestine in northern Indiana. And as you can see, the lake is just behind me. Now imagine being a kid growing up in the 1980s with all the mythology of Jason and Friday the 13th. And I actually grew up with a lake. During that time, there was a real palpable mythology that Jason lived in, every lake, whether it be in northern Illinois or southern South Dakota or here in northern Indiana. So I have my very own Crystal Lake in my backyard. Every good horror fan has to have an origin of where their love for horror came from. Right there, that house right there is where I spent my weekends as a child growing up. I told you guys before, but Dad and I would drive to a little town on the way up and rent a bunch of movies and spend the weekend all hunkered down and watching horror movies. Now when I was growing up during the 1980s, it was the time when VHS was exploding all over America, and every weekend there would be just tons of new movies because the distributors were literally trying to find things to fill the shelves on the stores. So I remember seeing some crazy movies that either you can't even find these days or it's very difficult to find. Movies like Terror at Red Wolf Inn, Blood Diner, Headless Eyeballs, and of course a lot of the classics that we all grew up with during the 80s.
I became fascinated with horror movies when I was about 8 or 9 years old. The theater was a theater in Oceana, West Virginia called the Guyan Dot Theater. My first horror movie, gather this one, Scared to Death. And the second horror movie I became fascinated with, of what part I saw other than hiding behind the seat, was The Hand.
Dad's going to check with the neighbor to see if maybe we can get a little bit closer to the house. We don't know the people who own 1313 Blood Lane these days, but maybe we can get in for a little closer sneak peek. Well, evidently the new owners of the house aren't necessarily the friendliest people in the world. I'm so glad I got to show you guys where I grew up on the weekends as a kid, developed my love for horror movies, and laid the foundation for Barry Morgan Horror Geek. So there you have it, everyone, the actual 1313 Blood Lane. Take care, everybody.